Day 1345 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 1,140,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 960 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 2 tanks, 3 APVs, 25 artillery, 2 air defense systems including a Pantsir S2 and an OSA, but add to that 2 oil refineries successfully hit yesterday. These are small fry facilities located in Ulanovsk and the Mariel Republic. But if that wasn't enough, there was the Stavrolen Zavod chemical plant and a gas processing plant hit in Stavropol Krai, and the 750 kilovolt Novobranskaya substation in Bryansk, all coming after Ukrainian attack drones mounted a widespread raid deep into Russia yesterday. There was panic in occupied Simferopol of Crimea yesterday, as well as the local thermal power plant was hit, and so was the town of Vardaskoa, just a few clicks north of the city, with the Atan oil depot burn-in, sanctioned by drones again, after already coming under that very same special type of sanctioning back on October 17th, where at the time at least 5 fuel tanks were caught in a blaze. Beyond that and into today, the Moscow region had woken up early to the sounds of inbound UAVs, with local news coverage calling the ensuing sounds as similar to explosions, quote unquote. Sheesh. Calling it Putin's morning flatulence would have been just as believable. Meanwhile, up in Chelyabinsk, a fuel tanker that hauls gasoline caught on fire, adding to the latest in a string of mysterious fires outside the reach of most AFU aerial threats. Possibly sabotage related, because prior to this incident, and not far away to the north, at Yekaterinburg, an anti-Russian activist group called the United Front of Resistance claims they destroyed a patch panel cabinet related to nearby oil storage tanks that monitors fuel levels, pumps, and alarms. No mainstream reports confirm the event, as Russian media suppresses partisan hits, but the event slots into 100 plus similar sabotage incidents actioned by this group, as per their own Telegram logs. Then on the map and on the infrastructure front, a video has surfaced of the sinking of a Russian floating crane, the PK-400, which had been under construction at the Sevastopol marine plant. Ultimately, the Russian shipbuilders capsized the crane and sank it, never completing its construction. Now to the main map and to the latest in the central Donbass front lines, with the Ukrainian defense forces who drove back the enemy near Novoshakhova, and enemy advances at Pokrovsk. Now specifically for Pokrovsk, fighting continues in the western, northern, central and eastern parts of the town. In the west, battles are ongoing in the Molodetsky district toward the first Pokrovsk mine, and in the Kotelina area. It was in this zone that the Russian troops raised their tricolor flag yesterday, which was later destroyed by a Ukrainian FPV drone. However, enemy infantry still remains in or near the area, while occupiers have entered the Rashina area, located to the near of northern Pokrovsk. Being the case, controlling it allows the Russians to threaten the main highway toward Pavlorad, provided they have sufficient manpower on site. Now, as for the connected adjacent front in the Myrnorad direction, Russian forces are launching assaults on the town, and take for instance, just north of here, Russian forces are looking to encircle from Rodinska to Pokrovsk, with claims of taking this settlement, but thus far appears to be a claim that's unsubstantiated, with otherwise Russian assaults on the eastern edge of Myrnorad. So as for the AFU entry point for this wider garrison, spans approximately 5 or 6 kilometers, with some commentators surprised by a lack of withdrawal of Ukrainian forces in the claimed cauldron, on risk of encirclement, although, as it stands, these supply lines are a much wider entry point to the southern zone of activity here, when compared against closed-off garrisons of the past, previously held by Ukrainian forces. So the hopes for a quick Russian encirclement snatch generally take a bit longer than expected. Overall, the situation remains tense. Myrnorad and Pokrovsk are under significant pressure, though unlike Avdiivka and Bakhmut, Ukraine has much more significant defenses beyond these 2 urban areas. Then briefly to the Dograpilla front, marked by high-intensity combat, but with the expected outcome of Ukrainian forces performing more clearing operations between Shikova and Novashikova. As for additional activity to be seen on the map, up in the Lerman direction with the 120th Territorial Defense Brigade striking at Russian positions with FPV fire, for a location that is considered another high priority for the Russian Ministry of Defense's land ambitions coming into winter, as the Kremlin really looks to carry new land capture celebrations into the new year, where they hope to control the narrative, one which challenges their slow pace of operations. Then beyond these updates and around the map, Ukrainian soldiers from the 44th Artillery Brigade destroy Russian howitzers and ammunition field depots somewhere in the south. Then next up, also seen more of this very special type of drone-on-drone activity, with the AFU's Aero Bomber unit shown to destroy Russian fiber optic FPV drones waiting in ambush. Numerous examples to show here, with most, if not all of it, showing these drones rather out in the open, which amounts to being not overly worthy of the phrase waiting in ambush. The drones are destroyed, with shrapnel piercing of some of those lithium batteries, given into a thermal runway shot that follows. Now to the news, with a draft 12-point blueprint titled Elements Toward Peace in Ukraine, reportedly initiated by Finland, is circulating among European capitals, and where the framework envisions two phases for negotiations in the Russo-Ukrainian war. The first part, an immediate ceasefire followed by structured negotiations, and according to this draft, the ceasefire would take effect within 24 hours of both parties accepting the plan, by which time the contact line would be frozen at that point. The plan further proposes that monitoring begin immediately under a US-led security network, and then among the additional elements in the document is the establishment of security zones along the front where military activity is banned, plus initiation of governance talks for occupied territories, and the creation of a reconstruction fund sourced from frozen Russian assets, and a contingent mechanism for gradually lifting sanctions on Putin's Russia. Zelensky has described the document as, quote, first of all a ceasefire and then diplomacy, as he emphasized that it is not a definitive war-ending treaty. For Russia, it poses a choice between cooperation and losing control over sanctions relief, the dangling carrot. However, the adoption of this framework by Russia is still seen to be unlikely, with Russia continuing to take the opposite approach of pseudo-diplomacy first, then a ceasefire later. Meanwhile, for this Kremlin gremlin, keeping very busy speaking with soldiers at a hospital, where he doubled down on telling the soldiers how well the special military operation was going. He may have also doubled down on his bulletproof body armor vest, by the looks of things. Meanwhile, Russian intelligence and the Kremlin leadership have ramped up rhetoric about internal traitors and saboteurs, fueling speculation of paranoia inside Putin's circle, with Russia's intelligence services scrambling to sniff out traitors inside the Kremlin specifically. The Kremlin is hunting the Kremlin. According to circulating Russian sources, fears of a potential coup have thrown the leadership into panic mode. The irony becomes one of this kind of internal purge campaign that only tightens the echo chamber. When everyone's terrified of giving bad news, you get what's called the yes man effect. That means Putin's getting filtered battlefield reports that sound more like fan fiction than fact. The result is a Kremlin leadership increasingly isolated from the actual war it started, with information received in propped up by fear, propaganda, and oil money that's now leaking faster than their pipelines. It's the very same authoritarian blindness that ends many an empire that thought it could control the truth. Now to the wider geopolitical front. US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping held their first in-person meeting in 6 years on the sidelines of the APEC Summit, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in South Korea. The 100-minute bilateral talks at Kimhae Air Base focused primarily on de-escalating the US-China trade war. Although Russia emerged as a key geopolitical flashpoint, Trump explicitly raised Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine, seeking Beijing's leverage over Moscow to push for a ceasefire and peace deal. Trump, speaking aboard Air Force One en route back to Washington after the meeting, said the two leaders discussed Russia's invasion very strongly and agreed to work together to end the war. Those being quotes. He emphasized Xi's influence over Vladimir Putin, saying Xi is going to help us. The Chinese president echoed a cooperative tone, calling the US and China partners and friends, though he avoided direct mention of Russia. But fair to say here, until any tangible results emerge from support for ending the Russia-Ukraine war, where China holds massive leverage, then this latest presidential exchange likely amounts to little more than polite formality. Now, the talks also touched on China's purchases of sanctioned Russian oil, where Trump claimed Beijing was cutting back very substantially, framing it as part of broader trade and diplomatic efforts. However, satellite images of a Russian dark fleet tanker moving fuel cargo to Chinese ships off the coast of Malaysia leaves more questions than answers. Or maybe it's just a very close and personal friendly hello being exchanged there. Next up, and related to this, amid tightening sanctions, Indian refiners have been rethinking Russian oil imports, with even HPCL Mittal Energy, a major joint venture refiner operating in Punjab, is said to have paused new Russian oil purchases. Analysts say the move hints at a gradual cooling of Moscow's energy foothold in Asia as compliance risks mount and Western pressure tightens, even though this weaning off of Russian energy won't manifest overnight. And so to follow up with news in this sentiment, Gazprom, one of the flagships of the Russian economy, the majority state-owned oil and gas company, has seen better days, as the energy giant reports third quarter of 2025 losses at 160 billion rubles, with previous quarterly results showing a volatile, albeit downward trending direction, with 2 of the last 3 quarters mirrored in losses. Q3 of 25 was also found to show a negative cash flow of 232 billion rubles, which means operations are draining cash despite nominal operating profit. Gross revenues, which have also been sliding. So Gazprom's slump underscores a deeper unraveling of Russia's energy backbone. Once the Kremlin's pride, the energy giant now mirrors an economy bleeding liquidity and credibility alike. With both EU and US sanctions closing in on revenues and trading partners, the illusion of resilience is cracking. The losses aren't just financial, they're structural, and they're mounting. Then in related economy news, the Central Bank of Russia has predicted that in the event of tougher sanctions and a drop in oil prices to $35 a barrel, amid tightening Western sanctions, Russia could face its worst economic downturn since the 1990s. As of now, this remains just a hypothetical scenario for Russia. However, the fact that such predictions are made public by the RCB is interesting. Now, $35 a barrel seems low for Russian Urals crude oil, with the current price hovering around $60-something a barrel, but the price has previously collapsed to around $50 a barrel, and even $45 in mid-2022, with huge discounts applied to India and China after initial sanctions commenced. So, with renewed sanctions cutting off Western markets, not to mention concerns for Asian markets turning to alternative suppliers, Russia faces the very real prospect of a deepening revenue squeeze. Then headed across to a bit of a cheap shot funny to round out the video today. This one comes from Ukrainian blogger Michael Shitelman, who shared an amusing Russian fact, or rather a Russian statistics agency reported fact, that the national average height for adult men in the country has dropped to 162.9 centimeters, about 5'3" inches, down from 178 centimeters, around 5'10", in previous years. Now, Russian men haven't actually shrunk since the last year's stats, not including those who never returned from the SMO. Instead, the way the agency averaged height decided to change, as they started including ages 15 and up in the calculation for average male adult height. But why would any country want to do that? It's highly unusual. Well, as Michael puts it, and I'm right here with him on this one, it has the effect of conveniently pulling the number down, with the Russian Rosstat agency likely compelled to adjust how the metric is calculated, massaging the number all the way down to something remarkably close to the height of the sitting Russian president. As such, deciding to portray the average adult Russian male using President Putin as the model. Oh, the humanity. Oh, the Putin humanity. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, all of those wonderful things for the channel, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!